I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but I think someone has been watching my family at night. I'll try to be as brief as possible and stick to the relevant events that are giving me this feeling. But the latest event happened last night and I didn't get much sleep, so apologies if I ramble or if I'm unclear. My wife and I recently purchased our first home after the birth of our daughter. Everything was as you would expect the first few months: painting, decorating, renovating, basking in our newfound slice of the American dream. You get the idea. Unusual things started happening several months ago. One day as I was getting home from work, I passed by a strange truck, 2 or 3 houses down from ours. I say strange for a few reasons. We know literally everyone in our small neighborhood, and I never seen this truck or person before. There's no reason for through traffic to come down our street, and the truck was driving very slowly, like put it in drive but don't press on the gas slowly. As I pulled in the driveway, the truck flipped a U-turn and came back towards my house. Getting out of my car, the truck crawled by and the driver stared daggers at me as he passed, and then he sped off. I don't like to judge based on appearances, and I like to think that I don't scare easily, but something about this guy's eyes gave me a bad feeling. Obviously, this was weird. I mentioned what happened to my wife, telling her we should be more mindful about security. When I told her the type of truck, my wife said that same truck drove by and the guy started staring at me when I got home this afternoon. I thought he was just being creepy and checking me out. I tried to tease her a bit to lighten the mood, calling her cocky for assuming any guy driving by was checking her out. I didn't want to freak her out, but I was definitely freaked out. I saw the truck a few more times over the next couple of weeks, either driving by slowly or parked down by the block and facing our yard. But one day the truck stopped driving by, and we haven't seen it since. I sort of dismissed the whole thing as just me being paranoid. Then other things started happening. In the past month or so, my wife and I have been hearing tapping on the windows at the front of our house at night. It's happened 2 or 3 times to each of us separately, always around 10 or 11 p.m., and it's always a soft but distinct tap. It sounds like a knocking with a single knuckle on the metal part of a screen door, if that makes sense. The first time that my wife and I heard the tapping together was last weekend. We were in the front room playing with our daughter around 9:30, just about to settle her down for bed. Our front room has a large, almost floor-to-ceiling window running the length of the wall next to the front door, which faces the street. We were all sitting on the floor with our backs to the window, reading our daughter a book when we heard it. That tap noise. Now our house is older. Creaks and cracks are not uncommon, but this sound was so distinctly intentional that my wife and I immediately looked at each other and bolted up out of the room. I had my wife and daughter lock themselves in the back room while I turned on all the lights and did a sweep around the outside of my house. Of course, I didn't see anything and was ready to dismiss the whole thing as more paranoia over something that probably had an innocent explanation. Until last night, around 9:45, we heard our daughter making noise in the baby monitor. I waited a few minutes to see if she would settle down, but when it became clear she wouldn't, I got up to put her back to sleep. The layout of the room is important to visualize this next part. This room is on the side of our house, but the exterior wall juts out a bit in an L shape, and the corner of this L is made up of windows. If you're standing in the door to the room, you're directly across from these windows in one corner, and there's a rocking chair in the other corner pointed towards the front of the house. One window faces the street and the other faces our neighbor's house. A garden bed planted with small shrubs plants around the outside of the house directly underneath. I was sitting in the chair getting my daughter settled down. I had a lamp on so the room was softly lit. Once she fell asleep, I stood up to put her in the crib when something caught my eye. There was a figure standing about a foot away from the window, in the bare space between the shrubs and the house. They were just staring at us. I didn't look enough to see anything more than what appeared to be a man in a light gray hoodie, standing a few feet away on the other side of the grass. Sprinting from the room, I brought my daughter back to my wife and I's bedroom, leaving her there while telling my understandably confused wife to lock the door. After turning off all the lights inside the house and turning on all the lights outside, I began moving from room to room, peering out the windows into the darkness. I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Whoever it was must have taken off after seeing me notice them and make a quick exit. Obviously, I had some trouble sleeping after this. I spent hours checking security cameras and going from room to room looking out windows into the night, hoping but also not hoping that I would see anything that could explain what happened. This morning I went outside to the spot where the figure would have been standing. I thought and hoped maybe there was a plant or something that I mistook for a person. When I got to the spot, I realized the figure had been standing exactly in a bare patch of ground about 2 feet in diameter, directly in front of that window. Part of me is hoping that I'm being paranoid. The mind can play tricks on you in the dark, seeing things that aren't there, especially when you're a sleep-deprived new parent. But with everything that's been happening, I can't shake the feeling that there was actually someone out there last night, watching us. I just hope that I'm wrong. When I was about 10 years old, I would go to bed around 8:30 p.m. I used to fall asleep in my mom's bed. She had a TV in her room, so I would fall asleep to cartoons. And when she would come up to go to bed, she would wake me and take me to bed. One night I was sleeping in my mom's bed as per usual, and I woke up to the door opening. I didn't wake up to look who it was because I figured it was my mom, since it was just me and her living there. I heard her walk towards the bed and then stop. It was a good 5 minutes before I heard the bed creak from her laying down. She laid down and put her arm around me. She never said anything, and neither did I since I was half asleep. She didn't wake me up to move me to my room, so I just figured she was letting me sleep in her room that night. I drifted off. When I woke in the morning, I rolled over and saw that my mom was gone. I walked downstairs and saw her sleeping on the couch. The title screen for Pretty in Pink was playing on the TV in the background. She woke up and smiled and asked me what I wanted for breakfast. I told her I'd just make myself a bowl of cereal. I headed to the kitchen and turned around to thank her for letting me sleep in her bed last night. She looked at me confused and said, "You didn't sleep in your room?" I told her no. She said she fell asleep on the couch. I said, "No, you came in the room last night." She looked at me even more puzzled and said, "No, I've been down here the whole time." I kept telling her, "No, you laid down next to me, and I even remember you putting your arm around me and stroking my hair." She looked horrified. Again, we lived alone. My mom has no history of sleepwalking either. To this day, my mom and I are still freaked out by this, and I don't really even like to talk about it. It never happened again. Never had any other paranormal activity in the house either. This happened to me back in 2017. I worked nights and I was getting my workout in before I had to go to work that night. My wife and daughter are in the living room, and my wife hears someone try to walk into our apartment. Panicked, she quickly gets my attention in the other room. I go to look through my peephole and immediately think it's my little brother. But when I opened the door, I realized it was a complete stranger. He had shaggy hair and his eyes were huge. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood up. He had his hands inside his pocket in the hoodie, and it looked almost as if he was clutching something pretty tightly. My gut instinct is strong, and I quickly try to shut the door. As this happens, he tries to insert his foot so that I can't. Luckily, I was quicker and was able to get the door shut and locked. I then booked it to my room and got my gun, still unsure of what this guy had in mind. But by the time I got back, he was nowhere to be found around my apartment. I keep thinking he just had the wrong apartment and maybe mistook it for someone else's. But then I remember he tried to stop me from shutting my door, combined with how quickly he got out of there. To this day, the thought of what could have happened still creeps me out. Although it goes without saying, I did end up calling in that night.